Hello everyone, this is the second video, part 2 part of class 11-12 biological sciences syllabus for the recruitment of assistant teacher. Like second is part is botany. You have to study first part is the cell difference between prokaryotic cells and eukaryotic cells, characteristics and difference with reference to nuclear and cellular composition. Between what is the difference between prokaryotic cells and eukaryotic cells and their nuclear composition, structure and functions and significance of cellular organelle, cell membrane, chromosomes, ultrastructure and chemical composition. Second part is plant anatomy. You have to study here plant tissue, definition, classification of plant tissue, distribution, function including mechanical tissue, right? Steel, you have to study here steel, different types of steel, their types and evolution of steel, normal and anomalous secondary growth in stem and roots in plants and root stem transition. Second part, that is ecology and environment, definition of ecology, ecological factors, ecological units, energy flow in ecosystem, biological ecological niche, general ideas about global warming, eutrophication, ozone depletion, acid rain, sustainable development, afforestation, process and significance, biosphere reserve, pollution, air pollution, water pollution, soil pollution, etc. You have to study here. Next is plant groups, their classification, that is classification of plant kingdom, like algae, bryophyta, pteridophyta, fungi, bryophyta, pteridophyta, gymnosperm, and angiosperm. You have to study that how reproductive methods occurs in algae, which are known as the amphibians or plant kingdoms. Different types of questions are here. Chitin, and in which of the plant kingdom its cell wall contain chitin. So these are actually different question can be asked here, like algae, range of thallus structure, economic importance as fooders, fertilizers, sources of iodines, laminarin, starch, phycocolloids, agar, algin, diatomites. These are different stored food materials that's present in algae. Fungi structure of cell wall, mycelium, spore forms, reproduction types, homo and heterothalism, it should be thalism, parasexuality, economic importance, bryophytes and pteridophytes, structural organization or gametophytes or sporophytes, a brief knowledge, economic importance, gymnosperm and angiosperm, structural organization of ovules, male and female gametophytes in cycas, and post fertilization changes, cycas, and this should be pinus, this is picus, should be pinus, and changes in embryo sac in angiosperm, different like in angiosperm only we found the double fertilization method, and how like pollination, double fertilization, different changes in post fertilization changes, how seed forms, how the mesocarp forms, pericarp forms, like endocarp forms, and what is the changes post fertilization changes of ovules, ovary. These are different question can be asked here. Now plant pathology, here you have to study the plant pathology, the diseases of plants, like necrosis, hypoplastic and hyperplastic symptoms of plant diseases, mechanism of infection, disease control, a brief knowledge with emphasis on chemicals and biological control. Taxonomy, concept of artificial, natural and phylogenetic system of classification, outline classification, role of cytology and phytochemistry in taxonomic studies, diagnostic characters, evolutionary significance of the following families, like Mongolaceae, Nymphaceae, Compositae or Asteraceae, Poaceae family, different groups like Solanaceae, Poaceae, Liliaceae, different plant families. You have to study here. ICBN principles and in international for botanical nomenclature, these are rules of priority and effective and valid publication, brief notes on cladistics, functions of herbarium, botanical garden, biodiversity and conservation, in situ ex situ conservation, brief note on IUCN and biosphere reserve. Paleobotany, fossils part, types of fossils, process of fossilization and geological time scale. Plant physiology, Here you have to study preliminary ideas about acid, base, and buffer, transpiration, mechanism, factors affecting it, how transpiration occurs, what's the role of transpiration, and what's the its why transpiration is called necessity evil. That is, it's a necessity for the plant. Also, it is a evil for plants, right? Role of minerals elements in plants, different like roles of different mineral nutrition in plants like zinc, magnesium. What's their role? Photosynthesis, photosynthetic pigments and their properties, photophosphorylation, Kelvin cycle, C4 cycle, photo respiration, cam plant respiration, concept of fermentation in terms of industrial biotechnology, glycolysis, pentose phosphate pathway, Krebs cycle, and electron transport system. And hormones, right, like plant hormones, like role of auxin, gibberellin, cytokinin, ethylene, abscisic acid in plant growth and development. Enzymes, definition, properties of enzymes, types of enzymes here. Plant biochemistry, here we have to study the general chemistry of carbohydrate, proteins, and fats. Cytogenetics and plant breeding, cell cycle definition and different phases, Mendelian linkage and crossing over, types with examples, chromosomal aberration like aneuploidy, euploidy, gene mutation, different types of mutation, gene mutation, how it's occurred, different types, importance, gene regulation, that is operon concept, and it's here you have to study the lac operon, and also how the gene lac operon, arabinose operon, tryptophan operons are there. Genetic code, protein synthesis, brief knowledge about transposon, oncogene, gene cloning, gene transfer, and PCR or polymerase chain reaction. Definition and methods and importance of mass selection, pure line selection, hybridization, hybrid vigor, tissue culture, definition, types, prospect in agriculture and forestry. Now, pharmacognosy. Pharmacognosy, these are, it's a active principle, microscopic characteristics and use of the following drugs yielding plants like neem, like kalmeg, Raulfia serpentia. These are different plants that's economically important, so, or medicinal plants you have to study. And then you have to study the microbiology part. Here, viruses, general structure, bacteriophage, concept of plasmid, electron microscopic structure of bacterial cells, development of endospore, process of transduction, nutritional groups of bacteria, that is photoautotroph, chemoautotroph, and that is, these are syllabus. That's physiology part, that is cellular physiology. You have to study the cellular physiology, that is molecular structure of cell membrane, mitochondria, enzymes, enzyme regulation. Already we have seen in the previous syllabus also, these are there. Biochemistry and metabolism, chemistry of carbohydrate, proteins, lipids, and nucleic acid, metabolic pathways like glycolysis, HMP sun, TCA cycle, beta oxidation of fatty acid, glycogenosis, cholesterol synthesis, protein synthesis, purine pyrimidine biosynthesis, hormonal regulation of metabolic pathways, oxidative phosphorylation, nutrition and diabetes, that is digestion and absorption of nutrients, composition, functions, and regulation of salivary juice, gastric juice, pancreatic juice, bile, balanced diet, RDA, BMR, RQ, specific dynamic action, calorific value of foods, biological value of proteins, vitamins, different types of vitamins, how the deficiency symptoms of vitamins, like fat soluble vitamins, water soluble vitamins, what's the different roles, hypervitaminosis, antivitamins, minerals, function, deficiency symptoms, understanding and over nutrition, undernutrition and overnutrition, and diet chart formulation for adult person and pregnant women. Body fluid and immunology, here you have to study about the different blood cells, how the blood cells occurs, how the blood cell functions, buffers, different buffers in blood cells, how the coagulation of blood occurs, you have to study here. The blood groups formation, circulation, concept of limbs and tissue fluids, immunity, like different innate immunity versus adaptive immunity, what is the difference between humoral and cell mediated immunity, hypersensitivity, like in acquired and immune deficiency syndromes. Like here you have to study the AIDS, different immune deficiency syndromes, heart and circulation. You have to also study here heart rate and its regulation, cardiac output measurements, factors affecting the cardiac output, ECG normal, ECG leads, then vectorcardiogram, like in case of ECG, different waves, P wave, QRS complex, and T wave, blood pressure. And you have to also study here how can measure different types of we have a normal blood pressure versus, that is SP is to DP is to PP, that is systolic pressure is to diastolic pressure is to pulse pressure, that is 120 is to 80 is to 40. So you have to also study here capacitance, resistance of blood vessels, molecular mechanism of vasoconstriction and vasodilation, hypertension, arterial and venous pulse, peculiarities of coronary and coronary related cerebral circulation. Now, next you have to study a respiration, human respiratory system, like in case of how our lungs function, what's the mechanism of breathing, like different types of, here you have to study the uh, different lungs volumes, like different measurements like ERV, expiratory reserve volume, RV, residual residual volumes, right? So different types of volume you have to study here. Now, interthoracic and intrapleural pressure, surfactant work of breathing, hypoxic condition, oxygen toxicity, neural centers and reflex regulation or respiration, how the regulation of respiration occurs, like how our breathing controls, what's the different parts of the brains which control the breathing rate, and physiology of excitable tissue, that is molecular mechanism of contraction and relaxation of different types of muscles, sarcotibular system and excitation, contraction coupling, different elastic components of muscles, heat production in muscles during activity, nerve impulse propagation, how nerve impulse propagation occurs, compound action potential of nerves, membrane current and conductancy, voltage gated channels, molecular basis of synaptic transmission, how the nerve impulse propagation occurs, you have to study here, electron microscopic structure of neuronal junction, that is junction active zones, gutter, postsynaptic receptor, EPP and MEPP, that is postsynaptic potential, you have to study. And nervous system here is the stretch reflexes, inverse myototic reflex, muscle spindle, proprioceptional reflex, spinal shock, structure, connection and function of cerebellum, basal ganglia, thalamus, hypothalamus, control of food and water intake, and neuroendocrine functions, functions of association cortex, asymmetric function of cerebral cortex, function of limbic system, neuronal basis of memory, how our memory formation occurs, sleep, a different how sleep, different types of sleep, REM sleep or rapid eye movement sleep, what is the difference between REM sleep and non-REM sleep, rapid eye movement sleep and non-rapid eye movement sleep, impulse transmission in autonomic ganglia, and molecular basis of autonomic neuronal activity on effector organs, spatial senses, receptor as biological transducer, Muller's law of specific nerve energies, transduction mechanisms in rods and cone cells, and auditory hair cells, gustatory and olfactory neuronal basis of sensory coding, pitch, loudness, perception, odor, taste, discrimination, physiology, color vision, on visual acuity. These are spatial senses, how the sensation occurs, you have to study here. Renal physiology, you have to study here, how kidney function, glomerular filtration, countercurrent mechanism, multiplier, different like in roles of nephrons, how structure of different parts of the nephrons, mechanism of tubular reabsorption secretion, diuresis and juxtaglomerular apparatus, how JGA occurs, endocrine system and chronobiology, that is physiological functions of hormones, pituitary, thyroid, parathyroid, pancreas, adrenal, cell signaling mechanisms of hormones, like different second messenger receptors like cyclic AMP dependent IP3 or inositol 145 triphosphate dependent second messenger receptor dependent cells, molecular signaling or hormonal signaling, diacylglycerol, tyrosine kinase, JAK-STAT pathway, hypo and hyperactive states of endocrine glands like acromegaly, different syndromes, Hashimoto thyroiditis, Cushing syndrome, and the pheochromocytoma, the and these are different diseases, Jetjiger biorhythm, free running rhythms, circadian rhythms in adrenal and pineals, and sleep wake behavior, neuronal basis of single and multiple oscillator of circadian rhythm, reproductive physiology you have to study, exercise and post physiology also you have to study, body temperature and regulation, how body temperature and regulation occurs, environmental physiology here also in present in syllabus, biomedical instrumentation, these all include in the complete syllabus of physiology, biomedical instrumentation, And here biomedical instrumentation, you have to study the basic principles and following instrument like UV photo spectrometer, how UV spectrometer works, ECG